Okay, we're going to talk about as-is contracts today. We're going to talk about at least 5 things that you need to know before you actually buy in the villages. So we're going to dive into the contract a little bit, the Florida real estate contract. We're also going to be talking about a little bit about bond and maintenance fees and fire and some other things that you need to know. One of the things I have to bring to light is that there is a POA, right, like Property Owners Association, that really represents the homeowners here. And if you're interested in joining that, there is a fee to join that, an annual fee. It's very minimal, but they're really, the Property Owners Association is really the watchdog versus the developer. In a lot of places, you don't have that. You might have the state, but you don't have a local watchdog. So one thing to know is Property Owners Association does exist to protect the homeowners. And I think that's a big thing. But when you're buying in the villages, in the villages, Florida, you need to know that there is a maintenance fee, and that's an annual fee. There's also a monthly fee of $164. And the maintenance fee does vary. That's an annual fee. And then, of course, you do have fire. And, that's typically included in your taxes. That's an annual fee. And a bond, sometimes the bond, the CDD, the bond, which takes care of the basic the infrastructure, the infrastructure here in the villages, whether it's the streets or the sewer, whatever, right? Like that's basically what the bond does. That is something that you do have to know that it does exist. A lot of times, a lot of people buy brand new and don't realize that there is an additional fee that's going to be attached to your taxes. So please be aware of those things, right? When you're buying in the state of Florida, not just in the villages, you do have to know that there is something called a seller's property disclosure that is deemed to be, we hope that the homeowner is being truthful or remembers accurately, but it is something that states what the owner or the seller knows. So just be aware that that is a form that if it does exist, it's not mandatory, but if it does exist and the seller and the owner has filled one out, that is something that you can look at and review to know what the seller knows and understands about the property. So it's very useful, right? That's the third thing I want you to look out for. The fourth and fifth, and probably some other points I have here that actually relate more towards the contract. We're going to look at that. And I think so first of all, if you're new to the channel, by the way, if you've never seen me before, some of you have been following me for over a year. You know that my background, my history is getting my license back in year 2000 and becoming a broker back in 2004, and have grown this particular company from 2004 to the present day to be the top company in the villages as far as the MLS sales goes. Been in this community for 17, actually, yeah, it's been just over 17 years right now. So we know what we're doing when it comes to the villages, that's for sure, and surrounding areas. And by the way, if you do have questions, you could always text me at 352-572-3796. Also, you can visit us here at buysellthevillages.com for any properties that are on the market. And right now we'll talk about inventory in a minute. I'll do a quick market update. And also want to wish everybody happy Thanksgiving, because you may not see me on Friday. I'll be celebrating with the family. So this particular video will probably replace Friday's video that usually comes out. Number 4 on the list, let's go back to the contract. Okay, we've talked about several things here, including the bond, and we've talked about fire, maintenance fees, the existence of the POA, the existence of seller's property disclosures, that type of thing. Actually, it's really meant for your protection, so you understand what the seller is saying about the property. The fourth thing I want to bring up is something in a contract called assignability. And it's actually very much overlooked. I'm looking at the as-is contract here, and it's on line 77, 78. But make a note, like if you're going to buy in our area, know that this is something that gives you a little bit of flexibility as a buyer, the assignability portion. And normally I recommend may assign but not be released from liability. May assign but not be released from liability. That gives you the flexibility to, let's say you're buying a place and you think it's going to be in your name. And midstream, you're not quite closed. It's about 2 weeks into the deal, and you want to change it into a trust. That particular check mark, if you check mark that box, gives you the flexibility of doing it without needing the seller's approval. So just know that that's an option for you. The second thing is know that you might be getting conventional financing, and you've got enough down. Down payment is not going to be an issue. You're not really worried about appraisal. Let's say you're not worried about appraisal because you're bringing enough money down, and the appraisal is not going to make you financeable or not financeable. Let's say that's the case. You're bringing enough cash to the table. You could always check mark buyer will pay cash for the purchase of the property at closing. There is no financing contingency. What's interesting is unfortunately, a lot of times sellers will overlook the second part, and they think, well, it's definitely going to be cash. It just means that there is no contingency on financing. So you have the right to pay cash or do financing, either one. So if you want that flexibility and present a stronger offer, this is basically going to give you a couple of, it's basically going to be your best foot forward, which in this environment, it's really crucial. Not that you overpay, although, if you're going to win a deal, by the way, as a buyer, you always overpay because you're going to be the highest bidder in every case if you're going to buy a home. That's just the way it is. But you'd like to try not to overpay, and you want to try to, put your best foot forward and put together terms in the contract that's going to make you look better versus the competition. That's basically what I'm telling you right now. These are hacks or a few things that you need to do when you're moving to the villages, when you're going to live in the villages, at some point down the road, or you're going to buy in the villages. These are things that you need to know. Okay, so remember this, the assignability. Remember also, if you do have this flexibility, you're not going to do VA or FHA, or you've got enough money down when you're talking to your banker, then you could check mark this box here that basically says buyer will pay cash, period. There is no financing contingency. So that is an option when you're putting together your basically as is or non as is contract. Either one will have that box. Hopefully that makes sense. And if you have questions, leave some questions in the comments. The next thing I have here, this is actually number 5, is on your property inspection. Make sure that you want to leave enough time to get an inspection, but you can shorten the time period. So I've talked about this in the past, where there is a difference between as-is contracts and non-as-is FAR/BAR contract. Actually, there's 3 different types, but usually we're really looking at mostly 2 different types of contracts, something called the CRISP contract. But we're usually dealing with the FAR/BAR or as-is. In the FAR/BAR contract, basically it gives a little bit more leverage to the seller, because the seller then has the right to basically do any repairs that are non-cosmetic, and the buyer has to stay in the deal. In the as-is, it's a much bigger loophole for the buyer, where it doesn't matter pretty much almost anything. Buyer can walk out of the deal and get their escrow money back. Which is not a fan favorite of sellers, because they want to keep the buyers in the deal, but at the same time they will be obligated to fix and repair non-cosmetic items. There's going to be an obligation there. So and of course, if the seller does not repair in the non-as-is FAR/BAR contract, then the buyer has an out. In the as-is contract, which is what we're looking at right at this moment, is if there's anything that is non-cosmetic for whatever reason, doesn't matter if the seller would repair it, the buyer can cancel and get their escrow money back. So if you're going to do an as-is contract and you want to put your best foot forward as a buyer, and oftentimes that may appear to give a little bit of a concession to a seller, but that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to get to a point in a seller's marketplace where we're going to try to put this super favorable deal to us as the buyer and make yourself look so bad that, guess what, you don't get picked, you don't win. It's like offering way below asking each time, hoping that the seller is going to take it, and sellers are a little bit wiser than that right now, knowing that everything is not, most things are in their favor. So my point around the inspection period is maybe tighten it up a little bit, maybe make a 4 or 5 day, 5 day inspection period, a short period of time, and make sure that the inspector can get there with enough time to inspect, of course. So that way you can either cancel or move forward on the deal. So shorter time periods. If you have to go to 10 days, that's a better way to go, as opposed to typically it's 15 days on the as is, right? So that's a thing. And then the last thing I have for you is escalation clauses is another hack, another way to really make sure that you win when you're trying to buy something here in the villages. Escalation clauses are being used, and just be familiar. Make sure that the person that you're hiring understands the usage of the escalation clause. And I think at first blush, you may think that you're going to be ripped off with an escalation clause, but if it's well written, you won't be ripped off. You'll just win and pay just a little bit more, $500 or $1,000 more than the second best offer. And because second best doesn't do any good when you're trying to buy a home. So things to consider if you have comments about that. If you guys have used escalation clauses in the past, be interested in knowing about that. Want to share some stats with you, some stats on current stats. We're looking at, pulled up the numbers this afternoon, and the numbers were such. We're looking at upper 70s. We're looking at about 78 properties for sale right now in the villages. And what I'm really having conversations about with all my agents is that there is really enough inventory. On the surface, you may think, okay, that's not enough inventory. There's enough inventory, but what we're seeing is things are coming on the market, off the market, on the market, off the market. So there's no accumulation of inventory like we've seen in the past. I ran those numbers recently, and we're seeing 3 days on the market. DOM is the abbreviation for it, days on market. 3 has been the average the last 100 days in the villages. If you look at traditionally, we've seen, going back in time, 45, 60, 90 days in Marion County. The further south that you go, usually the days on market's a little bit less. But right now, the whole market, especially with us here at MLS, is 3 days on market. So questions, let me know, 352-572-3796. Hope that everybody has just an absolutely fabulous Thanksgiving. Take care.